What if I told you that having endless money can be the most profound kind of poverty? It's a controversial idea, I know, but the truth is, the greatest prison in the world can be a life with no challenges, no struggles, and no real connection. Have you ever felt like you were playing a role, going through the motions in a life that looks perfect on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside? You're not alone. And the story you're about to hear exposes this truth in the most dramatic way possible. Now let's be honest for a second. There's a part of us that loves the idea of watching a pampered princess get a dose of reality, right? We're drawn to the spectacle of when privilege meets reality, secretly hoping to see them fail. It's the ultimate reality show fantasy. But what if the real story isn't about her failure? What if the journey from luxury to laundry was designed to break her, but instead, it accidentally ends up building the one thing she never knew she needed: a heart? That's exactly where this story takes an unexpected turn. We're diving headfirst into the world of Chloe Martin, a billionaire's daughter who agrees to join a reality show to experience real life. The plan? Swap her life of private jets and penthouses for the cramped apartment and grueling shifts of a hotel maid. She thought it was a game, but what she didn't count on was him, the maid's kind, grounded brother who sees a struggling woman, not a secret heiress. This isn't just about a rich girl. Humbled, it's about what happens when a fake life uncovers dangerously real feelings. Stick with me, because you're about to discover the one thing that separates a truly rich life from a merely wealthy Ani, and the answer will surprise you. You see, it's one thing to live in a gilded cage and another to rattle its bars, demanding to know what's outside. For someone like Chloe Martin, the world was less a planet and more a personal playground, curated and sanitized for her pleasure. She had everything, which paradoxically meant she had nothing of real substance. Life wasn't lived, it was presented to her on a silver platter, every challenge resolved. When the producers pitched the show, they didn't just sell an experience. They sold an escape from the suffocating perfection of her existence, a true taste of the real world. It's funny, isn't it? The assumption that a rich girl like her would even entertain such an idea seems ludicrous. But people often mistake comfort for happiness. Think about if you ever felt stuck in a routine, even a comfortable one, and craved something to just shake things up. That was Chloe on a billionaire scale. The idea of switching lives wasn't just a gimmick for a TV show, it was a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in Chanel and champagne. She agreed, not with enthusiasm, but with the detached curiosity of someone about to watch a particularly interesting movie starring herself. Her father, a man who built an empire from grit and shrewd decisions, saw this as a character-building exercise, albeit a public one. He greenlit the project, imagining it would be a short, sharp lesson for his daughter. What Chloe envisioned, however, was a bit of a joke, a temporary descent into what she imagined was a simpler life. She packed designer work clothes and expected the hardship to be purely cosmetic. This journey from luxury to laundry was, in her mind, just another chapter in her fabulous story, not a fundamental rewriting of who she was. Let's be honest, for her, the concept of struggle was purely academic, like a chapter in a history book she'd never have to read for a test. A person with a true working-class heart understands that exhaustion isn't just being tired, it's a bonne deep weariness that sleep doesn't always cure. Chloe couldn't possibly grasp that. To her, hard work was an abstract idea, not the reality of aching feet and the mental drain of a thankless job. This disconnect was the very core of the impending collision, the first step towards an heiress. Humbled, behind the scenes, the producers were practically drooling. They knew the gold wasn't in her success, but in her inevitable spectacular failure. It's the classic clash that sells when privilege meets reality. They weren't just creating a show, they were engineering a narrative of a secret heiress brought down to earth. A story arc that would be irresistible to millions. The conflict between truth versus ratings was already tipping heavily in favor of the Latter, a battle fought and won before the first camera even started rolling. And so, with a shrug and a smile for the cameras, Chloe Martin agreed to step into a fake life. She was blissfully unaware that this performance would demand more from her than she could ever imagine. This wasn't about pretending to be poor for a few weeks. It was about confronting the poverty of her own experiences. Little did she know that this staged adventure, designed for entertainment, would soon force her to discover feelings that were anything but fake, setting the stage for an unexpected complication that no one, especially not her, saw coming. The sterile, expansive silence of her mansion was replaced overnight by the noisy, condensed reality of a fourth-floor walk-up. The air didn't smell of imported lily, but of old wood, fried onions from a neighbor's dinner, and the faint scent of lemon. Cleaner. This was the first shock in the grand experiment of switching lives. It wasn't just a change of address, it was a change in atmospheric pressure. Chloe Martin stood in the center of the small living room, her designer luggage looking absurdly out of place, a monument to a life that had ceased to exist just hours before. Every object in the apartment told a story of a life lived, not curated. A chipped coffee mug, a worn-out armchair, a stack of bills on a small kitchen table. This wasn't a set, it was someone's sanctuary, someone's struggle. This was the unfiltered, real world, and it was far more intimidating than she had anticipated. The experience was meant to be a lesson, but the first test was simply to breathe, to exist in a space so profoundly different from her own. It was the beginning of her journey from luxury to laundry, and the laundry pile was already looking mountainous. The uniform was the next layer of this new identity. Gone were the silks and cashmeres, replaced by a stiff polyester tunic that smelled of industrial starch. It was a great equalizer. In that uniform, she wasn't Chloe Martin. The heiress, she was just a maid, another face in the hotel's bustling backstage. A rich girl like her had never worn a name tag that didn't come with a VIP pass. This one, however, felt less like an identity and more like a brand, marking her as invisible to the very people she used to be. This transition was the raw, unedited footage of when privilege meets reality. There's a universe of difference between sympathizing with a difficult life and actually living it. You can't understand the chill of a drafty window until it's your window, letting in the cold night air. Chloe was learning this minute by minute. The theories and hypotheticals of her old life were dissolving in the harsh light of her new one, setting the stage for an heiress humbled in a way she couldn't yet comprehend. It was a baptism by fire into a life she thought she could simply wear like a costume. The first blare of the 5:30 a.m. alarm clock was more violent than any argument Chet ever had. It was a non-negotiable summons to a day of grueling physical work. Her body, accustomed to waking with the gentle morning sun in a plush king-sized bed, revolted. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a demand. The life of the woman she was impersonating didn't have a snooze button for its responsibilities, and for the first time, neither did Chloe's. The reality of the working day was looming, a tidal wave of manual labor she was completely unprepared to face. And so she found herself standing before a mirror that wasn't hers, in a uniform that wasn't hers, preparing for a life that felt like a surreal dream. But the aching in her back from the lumpy mattress was undeniably real. The cameras, hidden in plain sight, were rolling, ready to capture every grimace, every stumble. Her fake life had officially begun, and the script was being written in real time by the harsh demands of a world that didn't care about her last name. The question was no longer if she could play the part, but if she could survive it. The hotel was a labyrinth of identical corridors, each one a new stage for her private humiliation. Making a bed to 5-star standards, it turned out, was an art form she had not yet mastered. Her hands, soft and uncalloused, were clumsy with the heavy linens. Scrubbing a bathtub wasn't a quick wipe down, it was a battle against grime with chemicals that stung her nose. This wasn't just work, it was a Relentless physical assault, the raw truth of from luxury to laundry. And her body was screaming in protest after just a few hours. To her new colleagues, she was an enigma. The clumsy new girl who didn't know how to properly wring out a mop and who seemed terrified of the industrial vacuum cleaner. They watched her with a mixture of pity and quiet frustration, offering clipped advice before rushing off to meet their own quotas. Chloe had to bite her tongue, swallow her pride, and accept the condescension. Revealing herself as a secret heiress wasn't an option. Her survival in this environment depended on her ability to remain anonymous, to blend into the very background she used to ignore. This deception was exhausting in its own right. Maintaining this fake life required a constant performance. She had to invent a backstory, feign gratitude for a paycheck she didn't need, and pretend that this grueling work was her only option. Every conversation was a minefield, every question about her past a test of her improvisational skills. The lie was a heavy cloak, and beneath it, an heiress humbled was learning that invisibility was one of the hardest roles to play, especially when you've spent your entire life being seen. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? To realize that the skills that make you successful in one world are utterly useless in another. Chloe's talent for navigating a charity gala meant nothing when faced with a stubborn wine stain on a carpet. The effortless confidence she projected in a boardroom was gone, replaced by the shaky hands of a novice. She was stripped of her power, her privilege, her very name. All she had left was the raw, humbling experience of being truly incompetent at something that other people did every single day just to survive. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her feet throbbed, her back was a knot of pain, and a blister was forming on her palm. In the quiet of the small apartment at night, surrounded by the evidence of a life of toil, she felt the profound difference between her and the woman she was impersonating. It wasn't just about money. It was about resilience. It was about possessing a working-class heart, a concept she was only beginning to understand through sheer, painful physical experience. There was a moment on the third day where she found herself hiding in a linen closet, tears streaming down her face. The sheer endlessness of the task, the anonymity of the struggle, it all became too much. She almost ripped the microphone off and quit. But then, a thought surfaced. Quitting wasn't just ending the show. It was admitting that she couldn't handle even a fraction of what millions of people endure daily. And for some reason, that failure felt more significant than the physical pain, a sign that something inside her was already changing. Just when the monotony of her new life felt like a permanent state, a different kind of energy entered her orbit. He wasn't a guest, and he wasn't staff. He was there visiting his sister, or rather, checking on his sister's apartment and her new roommate, Chloe. His name was Samuel Bell, and he moved with a quiet confidence that was calming, not arrogant. He was a paramedic, and you could almost see it in his eyes, a steady, assessing gaze that saw more than just the surface of things. Their first meeting was unremarkable, yet it shifted the axis of her world. She was struggling to haul a heavy bag of trash, and he simply held the service door open for her, offering a simple, rough day. It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't pitying, it was just kind. In her world, kindness was often a currency, a means to an end, but from him, it felt like a default setting. This simple act of humanity was a foreign language she found herself wanting to learn, the first note in a potential story of falling for the brother. She saw in him a groundedness that she instinctively knew she lacked. His life was about tangible, urgent things, sirens, emergencies, life and death. He carried the weight of the real world on his shoulders, yet he didn't seem burdened by it, he seemed anchored. This was a man with a purpose that extended beyond himself, a man with a true working-class heart. And for Chloe, who was just now realizing her own life's purpose was a shallow facade, he was like a lighthouse in a storm. You know, sometimes you meet a person, and it feels like they operate on a different frequency. Samuel was one of those people. He wasn't impressed by the glamour of the five-star hotel that served as her temporary prison. He saw the cracks in the facade, the tired workers, the sheer effort it took to maintain the illusion of perfection. This perspective felt revolutionary to Chloe. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing. And she found herself wondering, with a jolt of anxiety and intrigue, what he saw when he looked at her. The interaction was brief, but it planted a seed. In the midst of her strenuous fake life, this felt like the first real thing that had happened to her. It wasn't produced. It wasn't for the cameras, though they captured it all. It was a simple, human connection. This encounter was a dangerous and beautiful complication, the kind that could lead to a love across status, a connection that defied the very premise of the show she was on. She was supposed to be learning about work, not about the heart. As she went back to her duties, the memory of his calm voice and steady eyes lingered. It was a stark contrast to the demanding bells of the service elevator and the impatient sighs of the hotel guests. He was a moment of peace in a world of chaos. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something other than exhaustion and frustration. It was a dangerous spark of hope, a hint that maybe, just maybe, something meaningful could be found in this manufactured reality. Setting the stage for a hidden identity love, Samuel didn't see a billionaire playing dress-up. He saw what she was. Pretending to be a young woman overwhelmed by a new, demanding job. He'd see her in the hotel corridors, her shoulders slumped in exhaustion, and offer a small, encouraging smile. One afternoon, he found her staring at a hopelessly stained carpet, looking utterly defeated. He simply handed her a bottle of water he was carrying and said, "Don't let it get to you. Some days are just like that." He had no idea he was speaking to a secret heiress. This simple gesture of kindness was a profound event for Chloe. She was used to grand gestures, extravagant gifts, and performative politeness. But this was different. It was small, genuine, and offered with no expectation of anything in return. He was encouraging the person he thought she was, not the name she carried. The entire foundation of their budding connection was based on her fake life, a fact that began to weigh on her. This was the beginning of the tangled web of deception and redemption. He started sharing little tips he'd picked up from his sister over the years. "Pace yourself," he'd say. "It's a marathon, not a sprint." He was trying to help a struggling worker, to ease her burden. To him, it was a simple act of solidarity. To Chloe, every piece of advice was both a comfort and a small twist of the knife. His goodness only highlighted her deception. This wasn't just a hidden identity love story for the cameras, it was becoming a real, painful dilemma for her heart. Think of a time someone showed you a kindness when you were at a low point. Remember how much that meant? Now imagine you didn't deserve it, that you were there under false pretenses. That was Chloe's new reality. Samuel's encouragement was like a warm blanket on a freezing night, but she felt like a thief for accepting it. The irony was crushing in her real life. She was surrounded by people who wanted something from her, but here, the one person who wanted nothing was the one she was deceiving the most. His belief in her was disarmingly sincere. He didn't see her as incompetent, just inexperienced. "You'll get the hang of it," he assured her. "Everyone starts somewhere." He was, in his own quiet way, cheering her on. And a part of her, the part that was genuinely struggling and learning, desperately needed it. This dynamic of love across status was developing in the most ironic way possible. He was the one with the emotional wealth, offering it freely to someone he thought had nothing. She started to anticipate these brief encounters, these small moments of grace in her otherwise grueling day. They became the highlights she would recount in her video confessionals, though she would carefully edit the depth of her growing feelings. The producers were thrilled, seeing the narrative of a reality show romance taking shape. But for Chloe, it was becoming dangerously real. He was speaking to the maid, but the heiress was the one listening, and she was starting to fall for the man who saw the best in her worst performance. Their brief encounters slowly blossomed into longer conversations during her short breaks. She'd sink onto a bench in the service alley, exhausted, and he would appear with 2 cups of cheap coffee from the staff machine. It was in these stolen moments, away from the pristine facade of the hotel, that she began to see the true measure of the man. He spoke not of conquests or possessions, but of the simple, profound realities of his life. And with every word, her admiration for his working-class heart grew deeper. He talked about his job with a mix of weariness and fierce pride. He described the adrenaline of a call, the quiet satisfaction of helping someone, the emotional toll of the things he couldn't fix. This wasn't a story of glamour or power, it was a story of service. Chloe, whose life had been a monument to self-service, was captivated. The initial spark of attraction was fanned into a steady flame of respect. She was experiencing real feelings, raw and potent, that had nothing to do with the scripted reality show. The irony of their situation became a constant hum beneath the surface of their talks. She was living a fake life, yet she had never felt more real than when she was with him. He was drawn to her perceived vulnerability and resilience, qualities she was only just discovering in herself. This hidden identity love was a paradox. The lie was what allowed the truth of her feelings to emerge. If he knew who she was, he would have been guarded, and she would have been the same old Chloe Martin. This is often how genuine connections are made, isn't it? In the spaces where we let our guard down. Think of the friends you're closest to. The bond probably wasn't formed at a formal event, but during a late-night talk, a shared struggle, or a moment of unexpected vulnerability. Chloe was experiencing this for the first time. Samuel wasn't trying to impress her, he was just being himself. And in doing so, he was showing her everything her own world was missing: authenticity, purpose, and a quiet strength. The more they talked, the more the lines blurred. She was falling for the brother of the woman she was impersonating. A narrative twist even the producers couldn't have written perfectly. But this wasn't for the ratings anymore. She found herself jealously guarding their conversations, instinctively turning away from the ever-present cameras to keep their moments private. She was falling for him, not as a character in a show, but as a woman discovering what it meant to genuinely care for someone else's soul. One afternoon, he was telling a story about a scared child he had treated, and he spoke with such gentle empathy that it made her chest ache. In that moment, she forgot about the cameras, her father, the show, everything. She saw only him, a good man doing good in a hard world. It was a dangerous, beautiful realization. The game she had agreed to play was now holding her own heart hostage, and she was no longer sure she wanted to be set free. The conversations began to drift from the daily grind to the deeper anxieties that shaped their lives. Samuel, feeling comfortable with her, started to talk about the things that kept him up at night. He spoke of his sister's relentless hustle, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. He mentioned their mother's recent health scare and the mountain of medical bills that followed. These weren't dramatic complaints, they were just stated facts, the constant, grinding pressure of the real world. For Chloe, this was like learning a new language. In her world, problems were solved with a phone call, a wire transfer. The concept of a medical bill being a source of genuine, life-altering stress was completely foreign. She, who could spend on a single handbag what could erase his family's debt, sat there in her polyester uniform, utterly powerless. This was the brutal, unvarnished truth of when privilege meets reality. The chasm between their lives wasn't just about money, it was about the fundamental nature of their worries. The weight of this new knowledge was crushing. It recontextualized everything she thought she knew about hardship. Every tired line she saw on the faces of her coworkers now told a story of silent battles she couldn't have imagined. The cheerful facade of the hotel staff masked a reality of long hours, real pressure, and the constant fear of falling behind. The term working-class heart was no longer a poetic concept to her. It was the heavy, resilient muscle that powered the world she was just visiting. This knowledge transformed her. The heiress' humbled arc was no longer about the inconvenience of manual labor. It was about the profound shame of her own ignorance. How could she have lived so long, so insulated, so completely oblivious to the struggles that were the daily reality for the majority of people? She thought back to her friends, to their conversations about trivial frustrations, and a wave of revulsion washed over her. Her entire life started to feel like a ridiculous offensive play. Listening to Samuel talk about stretching the paycheck, or worrying about the rent, she felt an overwhelming, desperate urge to just fix it. To write a check, to make it all go away. But she couldn't. Her hands were tied by the lie she was living. To offer help would be to reveal the secret heiress, to shatter the fragile, genuine connection they were building. Her wealth, for the first time in her life, was not a source of power, but a barrier, a source of profound frustration and guilt. She would lie awake at night in the small, unfamiliar bed, the numbers Samuel had mentioned echoing in her head. A figure that was a rounding error to her father's company was a life-changing sum for them. The injustice of it all was a physical ache in her chest. The show was supposed to be about her experiencing real life, but it was doing more than that. It was forcing her to confront the deep, systemic unfairness of the world and her own complicity in it. Leaving her with a question she couldn't answer: what good is privilege if it only serves to isolate you from humanity? A profound internal shift was taking place, one that the cameras could only partially capture. It wasn't just about the physical hardship anymore, it was about a deep, philosophical recalibration. Chloe began to look back on her former life with new eyes, and what she saw horrified her. The lavish parties, the endless shopping sprees, the friends who talked about everything and nothing at all seemed so hollow now, so utterly disconnected from the pulse of the real world. Her existence, from luxury to laundry, was proving to be more of an emotional journey than a physical one. She remembered complaining about a chef overcooking her steak by a few degrees and felt a hot flush of shame. Here, she saw people grateful for a half-hour lunch break and a meal they could afford. The contrast between her manufactured problems and the real-life pressures Samuel and his family faced was stark and unforgiving. This wasn't just an observation, it was a deeply personal indictment of the rich girl she had been. She was beginning to understand that wealth hadn't enriched her life, it had impoverished her perspective. This dawning self-awareness is a painful but necessary part of growth for anyone. It's like realizing you've been confidently reading a map upside down your whole life. You have to stop, reorient yourself, and acknowledge how lost you truly were. For Chloe, every conversation with Samuel, every shift at the hotel, was a landmark. On a new map, one that led toward a more authentic version of herself. The journey of deception and redemption was becoming less about the deception and more about her desperate need for personal redemption. She started noticing the small joys in her new, temporary life. The shared joke with a coworker, the feeling of accomplishment after perfectly cleaning a room, the genuine taste of a cold drink after hours of hard work. These were simple, earned pleasures, so different from the passive, bought and paid for happiness of her past. It was a revelation. Happiness wasn't something you acquired. It was something you experienced as a byproduct of a life with meaning, however humble. This was the essence of when privilege meets reality. In her video confessionals, her tone changed. She spoke less about her own discomfort and more about what she was learning from the people around her. She talked about dignity, resilience, and the quiet strength she witnessed every day. The producers loved it, seeing it as the perfect narrative of an heiress humbled. But for Chloe, it was the raw, unscripted truth. She was breaking down, yes, but what was emerging from the rubble was stronger and more genuine than the person who had first walked onto the set. Looking in the mirror one evening, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The designer clothes were gone, her hair was tied back simply, and there was a weariness in her eyes she'd never seen before. But there was also a clarity, a directness. The polished, empty veneer of Chloe Martin, the heiress, was cracking. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what lay beneath. In fact, she was starting to hope that the person underneath was someone Samuel could genuinely care for. The team in the control room saw it all. The lingering glances, the shared coffee breaks, the undeniable chemistry fizzing between Chloe and Samuel. For them, this wasn't a beautiful budding connection, it was a narrative goldmine. The ratings had been steady, but this was the storyline that could make the show a phenomenon. A reality show romance between the secret heiress and the working-class paramedic was too good to leave to chance. The battle of truth versus ratings was about to get bloody. A producer, a slick man named Marcus with a predator's smile, pulled Chloe aside for a story development meeting. He praised her for her authentic connection with Samuel, then casually began to nudge her. "The audience is falling in love with you, too," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "We think it's time to, give them a moment. Maybe open up to him a little more, on camera." He was asking her to take something real and package it for mass consumption. The manipulation was subtle at first, then became more direct. They would orchestrate accidental meetings in more picturesque parts of the hotel. A sound guy would ask them to repeat a conversation because the audio was unclear. They even suggested topics for her to bring up with him, things they knew would elicit an emotional response. It was a masterclass in emotional puppetry, all happening just behind the cameras. They were no longer documenting her fake life, they were actively directing it. This is the dark side of the entertainment machine. It finds something pure and immediately tries to figure out how to bottle it, sell it, and profit from it. Think about any reality show you've watched. How many of those spontaneous romantic moments were actually the result of a producer whispering in an earpiece? Chloe was now on the inside, seeing how the sausage gets made, and it was turning her stomach. The show wasn't about reality, it was about the illusion of reality, and her genuine feelings were the main ingredient. The pressure mounted. Marcus started talking about the finale moment. He painted a picture of a dramatic confession, a tearful embrace, a perfect climax to their love across status narrative. He wasn't just suggesting it, he was writing the script for her. The entire machinery of the show, which she had naively agreed to be a part of, was now focused on twisting her budding relationship into a marketable product. Her personal growth and feelings were simply plot points in their story arc. Chloe felt trapped. She had come on this show to escape the gilded cage of her old life, only to find herself in a different kind of prison made of camera angles, ratings charts, and producer expectations. They wanted her to perform her emotions, to turn the one real thing she had found in this mess into a scene for the viewers. This was the ultimate test. Was she still the compliant character playing a role? Or had this experience truly changed her into someone who would fight for what was real? A new kind of fire ignited in Chloe. It wasn't the petulant anger of a spoiled child, but the protective fury of someone guarding something precious. When the producer, Marcus, suggested she steer her next conversation with Samuel toward his dreams, for the future, for a great emotional beat, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "No." It was a simple word, but it was a declaration of war against the show's manipulative agenda. Her real feelings for Samuel were not for sale. She began to actively sabotage their efforts. When she saw a camera crew setting up for an impromptu romantic scene, she would deliberately steer Samuel in the opposite direction. She started having her most meaningful conversations with him in the loud, clattering staff kitchen or on the noisy street corner outside, places where clean audio was impossible to get. She was learning to use the rules of their own game against them, prioritizing her authentic connection over their manufactured reality show romance. This resistance marked a crucial turning point in her journey of deception and redemption. She was finally choosing a difficult truth over a comfortable lie. She was no longer a passive participant in her fake life. She was an active agent fighting for a sliver of reality within it. This wasn't the rich girl who couldn't be bothered. This was a woman with something to lose, and she was discovering a strength she never knew she possessed. Her rebellion wasn't loud or explosive, but a quiet, determined campaign of non-cooperation. It's a powerful moment in anyone's life when you decide your integrity is worth more than someone else's approval. It's the employee who speaks up against an unethical practice, or the friend who refuses to partake in harmful gossip. It's choosing your own moral compass over the easier, more popular path. Chloe was making that choice, not for an audience, but for herself and for Samuel. She refused to let their bond, built on the shaky ground of a hidden identity love, be further contaminated by the cynical demands of television. The producers were furious. Her defiance was throwing their entire narrative off schedule. In a heated, whispered confrontation in a service hallway, Marcus reminded her of her contract. "You're here to make a television show, Chloe," he hissed. "Don't forget that." But his threats had lost their power. She looked back at him, the weariness in her eyes replaced by steel. "In protecting him from you," she said, her voice low but unwavering. The battle between truth versus ratings was now a personal one. Her defiance, however, came with a cost. It isolated her further, pitting her against the powerful machine that controlled her temporary existence. But it also solidified her feelings. By fighting for the sanctity of her connection with Samuel, she was proving to herself how much it truly meant to her. She was no longer just falling for the brother, she was actively choosing him. Over the show, over the producers, and over the easy way out. And this quiet rebellion would force a crisis far greater than any of them could anticipate. Her successful rebellion against the producers created a small, private bubble for her and Samuel. In this safe space, feeling her genuine affection and protection, he let his own guard down completely. He started sharing more than just stories about his day, he shared pieces of his soul. He talked about his insecurities, his dream of one day opening a small clinic in a community that needed one, a dream that felt impossibly far away. He was opening up to the Maid, a kind soul he thought had found, not the secret heiress. With every heartfelt confession he made, another brick was laid on the wall of her guilt. He praised her for being so real, the one person he could talk to without any pretense. The irony was a physical weight in her chest. The entire basis of their trust was her most profound lie. This wasn't a simple hidden identity love story anymore. It was a tragedy in the making, and she was both the protagonist and the villain. The path to deception and redemption felt longer and more impossible. With every honest word he spoke, the breaking point came one evening as they sat on a park bench after her shift. He looked at her, his expression open and sincere, and said, "You know, I'm so glad I met you. You get it. You understand what it's like to struggle, to work for everything. You have. You're not like those rich people who live in a different universe." The words, meant as the highest compliment, struck her like a physical blow. She could only nod and force a smile, while inside, her carefully constructed fake life shattered into a million pieces. This is the terrible price of a deep deception. It poisons everything, even the most beautiful moments. It turns compliments into accusations and intimacy into a form of theft. Chloe was stealing his trust, his vulnerability, his affection, all under false pretenses. Her real feelings for him were undeniable, but they were tangled in a web of lies so thick she could no longer see a way out. How could she ever tell him the truth without destroying his faith in her, and maybe in people altogether? The cameras kept rolling, capturing her tormented expressions. The producers, though frustrated with her lack of cooperation, were now getting something even better: raw, palpable guilt. This new narrative of the tortured soul was just as compelling. But Chloe was no longer aware of the cameras. She was trapped in her own head, replaying his words, feeling the crushing weight of her secret. The woman who once had everything now wanted only one thing: a clean slate, a chance to be worthy of the trust he so freely gave her. She knew she had to tell him. But how and when? The lie had grown too big. It was no longer just a detail she had omitted, it was the entire foundation of their relationship. Telling him now would mean confessing that their entire connection was born from a lie designed for television. It felt like an impossible choice: continue the lie and let the guilt consume her, or tell the truth and watch it destroy the best thing that had ever happened to her. Just as Chloe wrestled with her own conscience, an external force crashed into her carefully managed crisis. Her father, Harrison Martin, a man who viewed the world as a series of assets and liabilities, had been watching the show's daily rushes. He had approved of the character-building hardship, but he had absolutely not approved of a love across status. Seeing his daughter, a secret heiress, growing genuinely attached to a paramedic was not a narrative he would tolerate. It was an embarrassment, a threat to the family brand. The call came on a burner phone, delivered by a frantic producer. Her father's voice was cold, stripped of any warmth. He didn't ask, he commanded. "This foolishness ends now," he stated, his voice like chipping ice. "I don't care what you have to do, but you will end this ridiculous entanglement with that boy before the finale. You are a Martin. Do not forget what that means." He was reminding her that she wasn't just a girl on a reality show, she was his daughter. A rich girl with obligations to her name. His ultimatum added an impossible new layer to her dilemma. On one side were the producers, pushing for a dramatic reality show romance. On the other was her father, demanding she sever the connection entirely. And in the middle was Samuel, blissfully unaware that he was the central figure in a high-stakes game of manipulation and class prejudice. Chloe felt the walls closing in, the weight of her two worlds colliding with her at the epicenter. This is the classic conflict that has fueled stories for centuries: the heart versus duty, love versus family expectation. But for Chloe, it was painfully real. Her father's demand wasn't just about protecting the family name, it was about reinforcing the invisible walls she had only just begun to climb over. He was trying to pull her back into the gilded cage, to remind her that her feelings were secondary to her status. The idea of falling for the brother was, in his eyes, a catastrophic failure of judgment. The pressure was immense. If she defied her father, she risked being cut off, not just financially, but emotionally, from the only family she had. If she obeyed him, she would have to betray her own heart and inflict a terrible, confusing pain on Samuel. The choice was between two different kinds of heartbreak. The carefree girl who had signed up for the show was gone, replaced by a woman facing a choice with no right answer, a moral crossroads on the path of deception and redemption. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window of the apartment. The city lights a blur behind it. Who was she? Was she Harrison Martin's daughter, an heiress bound by the rules of her class? Or was she the woman who sat on a park bench and felt more at home with a kind-hearted paramedic than she ever had in her own mansion? The finale was approaching, a finish line that now felt like a cliff edge. And she had to decide who she was going to be when she reached it. The weight of it all: lie, the producers, her father's ultimatum, become unbearable. Chloe played out every scenario in her mind. If she told Samuel the truth now, the producers would capture it all. His shock, his hurt, his anger would all be broadcast to millions, turning his private pain into public entertainment. He would be framed as the fool who fell for the secret heiress. She couldn't do that to him. Protecting him from that public humiliation became her single, overriding priority. Then she considered the finale. The big reveal was designed for maximum drama. Her walking out in designer clothes, the truth laid bare for the sake of ratings. She imagined Samuel's face in that moment, the dawning realization of the scale of her fake life. The betrayal would be devastating. It would be an act of unimaginable cruelty. Her real feelings for him demanded that she find another way, even if it was a painful one. The path of deception and redemption required a sacrifice. So she chose the only option she felt she had, the one that would hurt him, but hopefully protect his dignity. She decided to become the villain in their private story to save him from becoming the victim in a public one. She had to walk away. It was an act of love disguised as the coldest indifference. The heiress, humbled, had to find one last performance. Within her, the role of the heartless girl who simply lost interest. The next time she saw him, she was a stranger. She was cold, distant, and evasive. When he asked what was wrong, she gave him clipped, empty answers. This was just a distraction, she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. It's not that serious. She saw the confusion and hurt flood his eyes, and it took every ounce of her newfound strength not to break down and tell him everything. She was falling for the brother, and now she had to pretend to push him off a cliff. He was bewildered, completely blindsided. "I don't understand," he said, his voice laced with a pain that tore her apart. "I thought we had something." She just shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. "You thought wrong," she whispered, the lie a final brutal act of her deception. And then she did the hardest thing she had ever done in her life. She turned around and walked away, leaving him standing there, alone and heartbroken, without any explanation. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The tears were already streaming down her face, unseen by him but captured in glorious high definition by a hidden camera across the street. The producers had their drama, her father had his compliance, and Samuel had his confusion. And Chloe? She had a shattered heart and the hollow, bitter knowledge that she had protected the man she loved by destroying any chance of him ever loving her back. The show wasn't over, but her story, she believed, was. The finale aired a few weeks later, edited to perfection. The producers, masters of narrative, had woven a compelling tale. They used Chloe's tearful confessionals, her arguments with them, and the raw footage of her walking away. The story they sold was not one of deception, but of a rich girl who became an heiress, humbled. They framed her decision to walk away not as a lie, but as a noble sacrificial girl who knew the love across status was impossible and ended it, to save the boy from a world he didn't belong in. The public ate it up. Social media exploded with praise for Chloe Martin. She was hailed for her honesty and self-awareness. Pundits lauded her for confronting her privilege and making the right choice. The very act that was her deepest dishonesty was spun into her moment of greatest integrity. The machine of truth versus ratings had churned out its final product, and it was a resounding success. Chloe became a reluctant symbol of personal growth, her story a modern fairy tale of deception and redemption, with the redemption part highlighted in gold. But in a small apartment across town, Samuel Bell watched the same show and saw a completely different story. He didn't see nobility, he saw a grand, calculated betrayal. He saw their most private moments twisted into a storyline. He saw the secret heiress behind the clumsy maid's uniform. Every kind word had spoken, every vulnerability had shared, now felt like a violation. He hadn't been connecting with a person, he had been providing content for a reality show romance. The praise being heaped upon her felt like a collective slap in the face. Her honesty was a lie. Her sacrifice was a performance. He had been a prop in her journey of self-discovery, a stepping stone for the rich girl's character arc. The kindness of his working-class heart had been exploited for entertainment. The person he thought he was getting to know didn't exist. It was all a fake life, and he had been its most gullible audience member. The sense of betrayal was absolute and devastating. All the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity: her sudden clumsiness, her ignorance about basic life skills, her guarded answers about her past, and finally, her cold, inexplicable departure. It all made sense now. It wasn't a change of heart, it was the end of a scene. He wasn't heartbroken because a girl left him, he was shattered because the girl he fell for had never been real in the first place. The view from behind the cameras was ugly, and it tainted every memory he had of her. He turned off the television, the manufactured applause and upbeat music filling the silent room. The public saw a redeemed heiress. He saw a woman who had looked him in the eye and lied for weeks. The show was over, the ratings were in, and Chloe Martin was a star. But in the quiet of his apartment, the only thing that remained was the wreckage of his trust, leaving him to wonder if any felt had been real at all. The whirlwind of post-show publicity eventually died down. The talk show appearances ended, the magazine articles faded. Chloe Martin, free from her contract and the ever-watchful eye of the cameras, was left with the hollow victory of her public redemption and the private agony of her actions. She knew the story wasn't over. There was one final scene to play, but this one would have no producers, no script, and an audience of only one. She had to find Samuel. She didn't come with an entourage or in a flashy car. She showed up at his apartment building on a rainy afternoon, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, looking more like the girl from the hotel than the heiress on TV. When he opened the door, his face was a mask of cold recognition. There was no warmth, no confusion, just the flat, hard look of a man who had been deeply betrayed. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the ghost of the lie that had defined them. "I don't have anything to say to you," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, and he started to close the door. "Please," she said, her voice cracking, "no cameras, no show. Just me. I owe you the truth." All of it, the desperation in her voice, the genuine remorse in her eyes, made him pause. Reluctantly, he stepped aside, letting her into the small space that had once been her temporary home. This was the final, terrifying step in her long journey of deception and redemption. She didn't make excuses. She didn't try to justify her actions. She just talked. She told him everything, starting from the very beginning, spoiled, disconnected girl she was, the cynical reasons she joined the show, her father's ultimatum. She owned the deception completely. Then she told him about the real feelings that had grown in the midst of the lie, how his kindness had changed her, and how the guilt had become a living thing inside her. The heiress, humbled, stood before him, completely exposed. She explained that walking away was a desperate, flawed attempt to protect him from the public humiliation she knew the finale would bring. "I know it was cruel," she said, tears now flowing freely, "and I know I broke your trust. But I couldn't stand the thought of them turning your pain into a spectacle. I chose the wrong way to do the right thing, and I am so sorry." She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was simply delivering the truth, however late it was. When she finished, silence filled the room. She had laid her heart bare, with no guarantee of how he would receive it. She had finally stripped away the last remnants of the secret heiress and the clumsy maid. All that was left was Chloe, a changed woman drowning in remorse, waiting for the judgment of the man whose working-class heart she had so carelessly broken. She had said her piece. The next move was his. Samuel listened to it all, his stern expression slowly softening as she spoke. He heard the calculated deception, yes, but he also heard the genuine anguish, the profound transformation. He had been hurt by the lie, but he had also witnessed her fight the producers and defy her father. He was seeing the full picture now, not the edited version from TV. He wasn't looking at the secret heiress who had fooled him, but at the woman who had stood in the rain, stripped of all her privilege, to offer a painful and complete confession. He thought about the person he had connected with on those breaks, the one who listened, who laughed at his stupid jokes, whose eyes lit up when he talked about his dreams. Was that all a performance? No. He realized that the lie had created an environment where something true could unexpectedly grow. The hidden identity love was a paradox, but the feelings that emerged from it were real. He was angry at the deception, but his heart still recognized the woman he had started to fall. 4. I watched the show, he said finally, his voice quiet. And I saw the person they wanted you to be. Then I saw the person your father wanted you to be. And now, he looked at her, truly looked at her. Now I think I'm finally seeing you. The path of deception and redemption had led to this moment of stark, unfilmed honesty. He saw that her journey hadn't been a game, it had been a crucible that forged a new person. His forgiveness wasn't a sudden, dramatic event. It was a slow, quiet dawn. It was a conscious choice to believe in the potential of the person in front of him, rather than remain angry at the person she used to be. His working-class heart, which valued authenticity above all, recognized the genuine remorse. It's going to take a while, he said, to trust again. But he took a breath. The woman you became, I'd like to get to know her. For real this time. No cameras, no lies, and so they started over. Not with the grand passion of a reality show romance, but with the quiet, tentative steps of two people building something real from the rubble of a lie. It was a relationship forged not love across status, but between two individuals who had seen the worst and best of each other. Their story would not be televised. It would be lived off-screen in the small, authentic moments that truly define a life and a heart. Their new beginning was a testament to the idea that real feelings can sometimes bloom in the most artificial of gardens. It was about forgiveness, about seeing who a person is striving to become. The show was over, the public had moved on, but for Chloe and Samuel, the real story was just beginning. A quiet narrative of two worlds colliding and creating a new one together. So in the end, the ultimate reality show wasn't the one broadcast on television. It was the one happening inside Chloe's soul. Her journey shows us that true wealth is never about what's in your bank account, but what's in your heart. The story of the heiress humbled wasn't just about trading luxury for laundry. It was about discovering that the most valuable things in life, empathy, integrity, and love, can't be bought. They have to be earned through the messy, beautiful, and often painful process of becoming who you're truly meant to be. It really makes you think, doesn't it? In our own lives, how often do we play a role without even realizing it? What uniforms do we wear every day, whether it's at work, with friends, or on linear? What truths are we hiding, even from ourselves? This story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to strip away the facade and seek what's real, not for an audience or for ratings, but for our own peace of mind and genuine connection. But that's my take on it, and I'm dying to know yours. What was the turning point in the story for you? Was it when Chloe chose her real feelings over the show's demand for ratings? Or was it Samuel's incredible act of forgiveness? Let's get a real discussion going in the comments below. Did you find yourself rooting for their love across status from the start? Or did you expect, or even wish for, a different ending? If this story about how a fake life can lead to a profound truth moved you, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that you want more stories that make us think and feel. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to read your thoughts.